Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be going through the history of Toontown Online. The game came out in 2003, and then it shut down in 2013. So I'm just going to go through the whole. I'm going to be as simple, and I'm going to summarize what it went through. So Disney had made this game with Shell Games and a few other producers, directors, developers, and it was for PC. The whole point of the game was to defeat the evil cogs, which were the video game equivalent to a businessman, and then the toons being so colorful and so energetic, that represents creativity, fun, imagination, all that, and it did well. 3 years into the release, it had over 1 million live users. Disney had invested a lot into this game. They even introduced the Real Life Toon Fest, which was a celebration to the release of this video game. And at one point, Sony saw the potential of this game, and they even helped release it onto PC with CDs. So this game had it had a lot of potential. It was 3D, it was colorful, it was multiplayer, it was a pretty large map. Obviously they added more stuff as time went on, but this is more focused on 2006 and below right now. But the game wasn't at where it could be. Luckily, at this point in time, the game was relatively new, so they could keep adding stuff into the game. For example, in 2005, that was I think that was 2 years into the release. They had added a bunch of things, being new streets. Donald's Dreamland was relatively new. The Cashbot HQ was released on the legitimate servers. Doodles and Battles, Goofy's Speedway, seasonal themed events, and they added the bear species. So as you can see, the game was starting to lift itself up, and Disney had realized that, wow, this is the potential this game has. Let's keep adding to it. So in 2006, they had added more tracks to Goofy's Speedway. They had polished the gameplay engine, being the mechanics of the game, how everything moves and reacts. They had added the Laba HQ, and they had added the cannon mini games and all that into the game, which isn't significant, but it's one of those things that when you're not playing with other people or fighting cogs, it's something that you can do to help, burn some time. In 2007, they didn't really add that much. I believe they had added level 7 gags at this time, because it was only level 6. And I do believe at one point you were able to get every single gag track until this point, or maybe they had changed it the year prior. I'm not completely sure on that, but I do know for a fact that at one point there were no such thing as level 7 gags. So that's also another thing that they added to keep people into the game. So as I mentioned before, at this point in time, the game was pretty much new. It was 3 or 4 years in. So in 2008, they had added the BossBot headquarters, different name tag fonts. They had added a lot more to the catalogs, the Clarabelle catalogs. And they had added a whole bunch of trolley games, Toon Escape, Photo Fun, Ice Slide that I love. Cog Thief is fun. And at the same time, they had realized how much of a toll it had taken with communicating with others, people were going on this game as a way to hang out with other friends that they couldn't meet in person. So they had added the ability to type into your chat, because at one point you were only able to use a certain amount of phrases, and while those help keep the game in check, it was extremely like restrictive with what you can and can't say. So yeah, in 2008, that was the third year that they added another COG playground or headquarters. So yeah, Disney. I feel like at this point Disney was like, what else can we do? Because they had already had the map established, the COGs. Like all they could really do at this point was to add a little bit more, but because if you add too much, it's not Toontown. It's a whole different game. So in 2009, they added boarding groups, which is extremely useful. It could use some tweaking right now, but at the time, it was extremely useful. And it also helped attract people to headquarters, because at that point, I don't know how it worked, but maybe you had to walk in, because the elevators were there for a reason. So I believe at that point in time, you must have had to all walk in on the elevators at the same time to be in a group. That's most likely how it went down. But in 2009, they had fixed that, and they had added boarding groups. They had also added toon parties, another way to connect every toon, have some fun, play mini games, do whatever they needed to do to spend some quality time together online. And they added April Toons Week, which was the yearly April's Fool's joke thing. So in 2009, they were just trying to they weren't doing much to add to change up the game in its entirety. In 2010, they had added the Toon News, the Silly Meter, which adds weekly revolves, COG Invasions, Victory Parties, Operation Storm Cellbot, and Winter Parties. All these parties are virtually just events, basically. Operation Storm Cellbot as well. Yeah. In 2011, though, they added Toontask Derby, which was like a competition where whoever could get through the most tasks. The News, which was the typewriter thing. I mean, that was Cellbots Invade. The cogs are up to something. The accessory update. And field offices, which is something that they have yet to add and rewritten. But they, like I was saying, this game was just, at this point, it had set the tone for what it was. They were just trying to keep it up to what people had wanted, and they had done a pretty good job with that, if we're being honest. But in 2012, they pretty much kept it the way it was. At that point in time, the game was 1 year away from closing, and hacking had been a legitimate problem. Toons would use injectors, these Python injectors, and type in these codes and kick people out. It was a disaster, and at that point, Disney was more focused on Club Penguin, because Toontown, while its peak at its time, I don't know how many users used to go on at one time, but in 2009, 10, 11, and 12, I know for a fact that it was anywhere between 1,000 and 20,000 on, which is a good amount, but compared to what Club Penguin was doing, it was pretty much a joke in Disney's eyes. So 2012, it wasn't anything like, it wasn't, it was just a quiet year for the game. But in 2013, that's when it started to, they stepped it up a bit, but I believe it's because they knew the fate of the game. They added street maps, which shows you buildings where your tasks are. They added more accessories. They added a whole bunch of like I don't know how to explain it. It's just a lot of like Lawbots assemble, like mini games and all these things. They added more events into the game, but you know, Cogs call a Toon Shrews, the Toontown and Gladhanders grid. I'm reading this off because there's timelines, and I just grabbed everything together for this. But at that point, we had realized that the end was pretty near for this game. It was 10 years, and it hadn't really changed since 2009. And clearly, Toontown was a lot more focused on Club Penguin. They said that at the time. So basically, the peak of Toontown was 2003 to 2008 or 9. And if you go onto YouTube, you can see it. Just look up Toontown. The peak videos were from 2006 to 9, because that's when YouTube came out. But at the same time, the fact that this game was able to stay the same and last that long while the market was changing a ridiculous amount, it speaks a lot. It speaks volumes, because think about this. When this game was in year 10, Minecraft had just come out. Steam was relatively it wasn't relatively new, but more people were starting to realize that, wow, computers are really powerful, and they were starting to push the boundaries. But this game didn't really push any boundaries. So that's why I think it sort of stayed behind. But what made this game so good was the fact that it was so original, and they didn't change the way it played no matter what. They just tried to add some things into the game, some more events. But, you know, hacking got the best of it. Money got in the way. You know, it's just, it's a shame, because this game is a lot of fun. And it could have still been, they were working on Toontown 2, and that was going to be like this but with better graphics. Like that, they were really they were focused on this game at one point. But then Club Penguin became popular. God knows why, because there's no point to that game. You're just a penguin clicking around. At least with this, there's a whole point and purpose. And yeah, that's the history of Toontown. But that isn't the fall. Or actually, you know what? I already pretty much mentioned the fall. And the fall is Disney. Disney was the reason why this game ended. There's no other reason. Hackers have a part to do with it, but Disney was so focused on their other games that ended up shutting down a few years later, that they just left this one. They left this one for dead, basically. Hackers had hopped onto this game 10 times more than they hop on Modern Warfare on the computer. And you can't play a single old Call of Duty without running into a hacker. At least with Rewritten, they've done a much better job with handling that. But that's the reason why this game ended. And that's the history of it. Disney made it, and Disney ended it. All on their accord. That was all on them. But at the same time, we should be thankful that it happened the way it did, because not only did we get Rewritten, but we got Corporate Clash. We got so many others into the community. It reignited the community in a way, because at that point in time, I truly think that the community was at its lowest. When the game shut down, it brought people back, because people were like, oh man, this game that we've been playing forever is going to be gone. And throughout this video, you probably saw a very good amount of pictures, and beta Toontown looked nice for what it was. And that's what Disney was going for. A nice online friendly game. And it's a shame that they shut it down. They could have done so much with it. But at the same time, what else could they have done? What else could they have added that would have made it feel the same but just more entertaining? Keep you on your seat for an extra couple of weeks. So that's pretty much the history of the game. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.